Damn, son, where'd you find this? King Majora at it again. Sup, people, it's King Majora here. Look, I am here to speak about one of the most infamous events in human history. Of course, I'm speaking about none other than 9/11. Now, 9/11 is a loaded conspiracy, right? You either believe the official narratives, you believe, Bush did it, CIA, Israel, everybody's got their own kick to it. And I'm here to tell you that, it's so nuanced, but I'm going to give you the perspective of what was peculiar, okay? So, basically, and I've explained this before, okay? So, we always hear about, George W. Bush, speaking of Bush, or maybe his other brother, Jeb, with, an election out of nowhere. But no, what about Marvin Bush? Marvin Bush and, where he was, security at and, having chairing at and, being in executive positions and basically in a predicament where he could control schematics for the World Trade Center's elevator shafts, There's a reason many of you probably have never even heard of Marvin Bush. It's the youngest, Bush brother, okay? And going hand in hand with him is Rabbi Dov Zakhaim, basically a Russian, Soviet Union stayover in the United States, with the likes of Ron Perlman, the Angel of Death, and, several people, because people don't realize that the Pentagon and what it does is solely determined by the Defense Policy Board. And if the defense, if the Defense Policy Board is packed with this and that, well, you're going to get this and that from the Pentagon. Well, all that happened to be chairing the Defense Policy Board were Jews, dual Israeli citizen Jews, or rabid Shabbos Goy Zionist, basically non-Jews. And that should be found odd, And it's like, when it gets attacked, when the attacks come that way, and, just so happens that the military's all running a drill in case of the event of a hijacked airliner. Are you kidding me? And even if so, why didn't the defense turrets go off? Okay, think with logic. Why didn't the defense turrets go off? Did anybody really think about that? They still should have anyway. Just for a defense mechanism of some sort of other schematic reading or some sort of ability to see a real threat in the sky, not to mention the lack of, construction debris and everything else. But, it's just things like that, World Trade Center 7 collapsing before, and before it did, CNN had aired and said it went down already. And if you should listen to Alan Zabrowski, because, this is to prove that it's not just a complete hive mind, the Jew. The Jews are all different. And it's like, before I go into any further, there's conservative Jews, Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox, liberal, reform, communist, international, Chabad Lubavitch, Messianism. And, and I do believe that the Chabad Messianism and the Oded Yanan plan and, Messianic prophecies is why they're doing it. But, back to the World Trade Center itself, speaking of, I mentioned Larry Silverstein. I do believe he's a dual Israeli citizen. If not, for sure he's a Jew. And he got the lease from Rockefeller. 99-year lease, and then all of a sudden, you kidding me? And he gets out an insurance policy, Larry Silverstein, I think it was 2 weeks or 2 months before, I can't remember, where, basically wanting I think he wanted 4 point something billion dollars for it after it came out. But the insurance policy, in case, a fucking attack happens to hit You know, come on, he only got half of it, but I'm pretty sure that he, you know, it's still, you know, billions of dollars. How did you know? It's like the five dancing Israelis, right? You know, these five undercover Mossad agents that were caught celebrating by several people, including mainstream media, and they get you know, basically taken in, and then they basically have 10 weeks of lie detector tests and detainments where they say, you know, the Palestinians are your problem. We are not your problem. The Palestinians are your problem. And basically, after failed lie detector tests, you know, Michael Chertoff, you know, head of Homeland, eventually after this, it's like, you know, his position, he let them go. You know, also, I do believe he was a dual Israeli. If not, he was a Jew for sure. And he, you know, let them go. And then they went on Israeli TV and said, we come from a nation that experiences terror daily. We were here to document the event. It's like, excuse me? How the fuck did you know? It's like, you know, the Odigo chat firm, the Israeli-based chat firm who was given heads up and giving heads up through its chat firm services, you know, of a terrorist attack in New York, you know, on that day, and they still did nothing, you know. You know, Converse Infosys should have had transaction logs that proved, you know, Converse Infosys was infamous for being a wiretap situation after 9/11. You know, Israelis wiretapping everything, not even going into the Talpiot program. You know, Unit 8200, Shin Bet security and cybersecurity intelligence blackmail apparatus. You know, top 10 cyber tech companies in the world that are headquartered in Israel. You fucking kidding me? At least they were at the time. So it's like, you know, and that's not the extent. You know, the Muhammad Anna and these partying dope fiend allegedly going to see Allah any day now, you know, just so happened to go to Delaware to get their pilot license, and they're so bad that they get flunked, and he's like, I can't give you that. You're so bad at flying, get the hell out of here. Yet, according to the official report, not only does, you know, Top Gun experts, pilots say that it's impossible, you know, that it's impossible. But no, it's physicists who responded said that it was impossible. Official 9/11 committee report, the official, like, you know, pushback was physicists saying it was impossible, and Top Gun saying they could not maneuver the way that shit did. Which, you know, brings me back to Rabbi Dov Zakhaim, who was chairing in certain places, having his fingers in every cookie jar, you know, in places where he could electronically hack or control the you know, the planes and steer them. And don't think that was behind at the time. Like, no, like, there's actual articles at the time where it showed, like, proof that, you know, they were capable in 2001 of remote controlling airplanes. They really were. So, you know, that's probably what happened. You know, some people say it's a hologram. I don't do that, but it's like, you know, nanothermite. Excuse me, Danny Zwienko, demolitions expert, you know, said that if nanothermite was found in World Trade Center 7, you know, basically, if they were, and Larry Silverstein even admitted that it was they pulled the plug on it. Larry Silverstein admitted it. And if one was wired for controlled demolition, then all of them were wired for controlled demolition. Not to mention the nanothermite. So, and there's so much more to this than just this. Like, I could go on and on. Like the, not to mention the, you know, the hijackers when they were down south in the United States, their location and address was like down the road from like a big Mossad operation, and Mossad was being caught left and right in the United States at this time. So, you know, you got to understand. So it's like, well, why was it done? Why was 9/11 done by Israel, in your opinion, King Major Ronnie Skelton II? I said, well, listen, you got to understand their plan for world conquest. People will always say it's an anti-Semitic this and that when you bring up Khazars and Kiev, but then out of that same breath, they'll also fail to mention the big Ukraine Heavenly Jerusalem project. you know. This combined effort to take the Middle East and Eastern Europe bloc, a big chunk of it, and create basically Davidic style classic Bible Judaism in the modern world, making people succumb to the Noahide laws. It's like Benjamin Netanyahu at this point has admitted, literally, that the Oded Yanan Greater Israel Project is a thing that they're doing. Now, why is Israel causing all this? Don't blanket blame Israel. Don't blanket blame Jews. Blame Chabad Lubavitch inspired Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu, because, you know, they want to say Jews and Israel and this and that, but they never get into the nitty gritty, which is Likud and Benjamin Netanyahu is in the back pocket of Rebbe Schneerson's Chabad Lubavitch, who's got their fingerprints in everything, including the presidency of the United States. Jared Kushner's Friends of Chabad, and I've advocated that Joshua Kushner, his brother, is the one that Chabad wants to anoint as their Mashiach ben David. But that remains to be seen. I go based on, you know, not to tangent too far, into names, you know, traditions, Yale courses on the Old and New Testament, Holy Blood, Holy Grail material. You know, Joshua or Yeshua or Jesus was a name that would have implied a king to be. You know, they're so enraptured with, you know, Chabad Lubavitch and, you know, Jesus Kushner, you know, Joshua Kushner. Being with your brother Jared, which is supposed to be the face of everything, make him look like the Antichrist because he's son-in-law to, you know, Donald Trump, who's seen as, you know, King Cyrus. But this is their whole plan. They're psychotic with the Talmudic based. They are Talmudic rabbinical. Basically, you got to understand when it comes to Jews, it's actually the Tanakh. If you're going by Tanakh-based Judaism, then you're going by the Elohim as plural, and you're dealing with all of the deities of the Levant, the Canaanite area in which spawned the northern and southern kingdoms of Israel and Judea. So it really depends on which one you serve. I mean, it's like, and there's no Satan, that's adversary, that's opposition, that's Mysterium Iniquitatis, you know. If God's all powerful, then why evil? Not to mention God/Gad is a Phoenician Elohim of fortune. You know, it takes so much to understand the religion, so I'm not just tangenting. You got to learn so much in such a short period of time. You know, these people are radical, and they're scorched earth going for broke. They want people to wake up to the, as they say, Jewish question, but they want to involve it with some sort of national socialism, ethno-nationalism in the vein of the Fourth Reich, Third Reich fusion ideology. And they don't want to conveniently bring up 51 documents by Lenny Brenner documenting Zionists and Nazis working together before, during, and after the alleged Shoah. And I say Shoah, not burnt offering, aka Holocaust. You see, there's so much to it, it seems like I'm rambling. But I'm truly not. See, 9/11 was the conduit for these archetypes that go into as far as into, you know, Freemasonry is involved. And you got to understand anti-Masonic propaganda, because some people got killed in the 1800s. Like, you got to understand that normal Freemasonry only has 3 bars. Only has 3 bars. So that could be your average Joe. That's when they say average Mason, but you don't understand that anything beyond the 3 bars of Freemasonry is not canonical Freemasonry. You could say Scottish Rite's a faithful adaptation and continuation, but it still leaves out the fact that, like the Bible and monotheism, henotheism is the textual origins. The Genesis is what matters the most. And you will never understand what 9/11 truly meant and why they did it unless you know the Bible. Which is why I made a 3.5-hour documentary breaking down the word Elohim, the pantheon of the Bible, why they're not false idols, why Satan is not actually a real boogeyman, and why the Bible is flesh and blood, most likely non-human intelligence that are guiding these very craft we call UAP. I know that this went into a huge, turn into left field, but to understand this 9/11 part, you got to understand so much more of it. And I go more into it in my account, I'm going to do more videos breaking down what I know. But just know that, 9/11 was most certainly done within Zionist interests, also working with European nobility elites and basically remnants of the Third Reich in the Soviet Union to create the cataclysm alongside the military-industrial complex of the United States for a project for a new American century, to create a colonial power and basically use Israel as a milking machine to feed our industrial complex to eventually overthrow. I'm going to be dead honest. Most people look at the United States and see a puppet of Israel. And it's the opposite, but you'll see before it's all said and done, because you clearly don't understand political nuance. And it's like, I sound like I'm desperately rambling, but I'm trying to make the point that, basically this. Yes, Israel did it with the help of Freemasons and people within our own government. It benefited Israel, which benefited us. Radical madmen who want to hasten the end times within secret societies like the Bavarian Illuminati, the Templars, certain Freemason institutes, and so many more, because it goes back to a Jesus cult and the Gnostics and inverting things and the Kabbalistic, roots of Samael, which in my personal philosophy and opinion is not the same character throughout. I mean, I've said that, Jesus is Dumuzi, is Dionysus, is Zagreus, but, Tammuz. So I don't want to keep dwelling on this. I wanted to break down the initial beginning in 9/11 with solely the opinion that you follow of Zionism and Jews in Israel, solely to flip it on its head of nuance at the end, so that you truly think about what you believe, what you carry yourself to know. Always remember that you don't know anything, just like me. And be sure to like and subscribe wherever you are at King Majora. lnk.bio/KXNGMAJORA. King Majora, son. Damn, son, this rant's over, nigga. Be sure to like and subscribe, nigga.